Right now, somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, a pot of beef stew has been cooking since this morning. No electricity, no gas, no flame of any kind, and it is still hot enough to burn your tongue. That is not a magic trick. That is not folklore. That is a wooden box sitting in the corner of a kitchen that most of America was never supposed to know about. I have been down this rabbit hole for 2 years, and what I found does not just change how you cook. It changes how you think about everything you have been told is modern, necessary, and efficient. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this method vanished from American homes, who made sure it disappeared, and how you can rebuild it yourself this weekend for less than $30. And if you're new here, hit subscribe right now, because Secret Verse is where the knowledge they quietly buried comes back to life. Every single week. Let me start with something personal. I grew up watching my mother stand over a hot stove for hours. Sunday dinners meant the kitchen was running all afternoon. The electric bill came every month without fail. We never questioned it. Not once. Because nobody around us questioned it either. That was just life. That was just cooking. Except it was not. It never had to be. Here's what I want you to picture. An Amish farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. A woman gets up before sunrise. She puts a cast iron pot of beans on a wood burner. She brings it to a hard boil. Then she lifts that pot off the flame, drops it into a wooden crate packed with dry sand, presses the sand tight around the lid, closes the top, and walks out the door to start her day. No timers, no power cord, no one watching the stove. When she comes back 12 hours later, those beans are fully cooked, steaming hot, and impossibly tender. The sand did all of it. One flame, one match, 12 hours of cooking with 0 additional fuel. That is the sand oven. And the reason you have never heard of it has nothing to do with it being primitive or unreliable. It has everything to do with money. To understand why this technology vanished, you have to go back to the 1930s and 1940s. When the American government began running electrical lines into rural homes across the country, it was sold as progress, and in many ways it genuinely was. But progress for whom? Because at the exact same moment those power lines were going up, the major appliance manufacturers were pouring money into universities, home economics programs, and government extension offices. Their goal was to make sure that every American woman learned to cook on an electric range or a gas burner. Not because those methods were better, but because those methods required a monthly bill. Textbooks were written with their funding. Curricula were designed around their products. And any cooking method that did not require electricity, did not need a stove, and could not be sold in a showroom was quietly labeled as unsafe, outdated, or unsanitary. None of that was true. But it was printed in enough pamphlets and taught in enough classrooms that within a generation, most American families had completely forgotten these methods ever existed. The Amish never forgot, because the Amish never plugged in. Now let me explain exactly how the sand oven works, because once you understand the science, you will never look at a slow cooker the same way again. Sand has a thermal mass that is roughly 3 times higher than air. What that means in plain English is that once sand absorbs heat, it holds onto that heat for an extraordinarily long time. It does not evaporate. It does not cool rapidly. It just sits there, radiating stored energy hour after hour at a stable temperature. When you bring a cast iron pot to a rolling boil and immediately bury it in dry sand up to the rim, that sand surrounds the pot on all sides and holds the temperature above 170 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 hours without any additional heat source. That is well above the threshold needed to fully cook dried beans, tender tough cuts of meat, slow cook grains, or hold a soup safely at serving temperature all day long. Compare that to a standard electric slow cooker. On the low setting, it draws around 200 watts continuously. Over 8 hours, that is roughly 1.5 kilowatt hours per meal. Multiply that across a full year, and you're sending somewhere between $70 and $90 straight to the power company just for slow cooking alone. The sand oven does the same job for free after the first flame goes out. Building one is simpler than you think. You need a wooden crate with interior dimensions of roughly 18 inches wide, 18 inches deep, and 14 inches tall. A wine crate from a liquor store is often the perfect size, and most places will hand them over for nothing. If you want to build your own from 3/4 inch plywood, you're looking at about $12 in materials. Line the inside with thin aluminum flashing or galvanized sheet metal, not for heat retention, but to keep sand from slowly sifting through the wood joints over years of use. That lining costs around $6 at any hardware store. For the sand, buy washed silica clay sand from a building supply store. A 50-pound bag runs about $7, and you will need 2 bags for a box this size. Before you use it, spread the sand on a tarp in direct sunlight for 2 full days, or bake it in your kitchen oven at 250 degrees for an hour. This step is not optional. Moisture trapped in the sand will steam your food, break your heat seal, and completely ruin the effect. Dry sand is everything. For lid, a piece of plywood with an old quilted pad or folded wool blanket on top works perfectly. It does not need to be airtight. It just needs to slow heat loss from the top surface. Total build cost, including sand, is between $20 and $30. Total construction time is about 90 minutes. The pot matters too. A heavy cast iron Dutch oven is ideal. Thick stoneware works even better if you can find it. What you want to avoid is thin enamel, aluminum, or anything with a glass lid. Glass cracks under the temperature stress. Aluminum heats and cools too fast to hold an effective cook. You need mass and thick walls, the kind of pot your great-grandmother would have used without thinking twice about it. For your first test, try this. At 9 in the evening, fill your cast iron pot with steel-cut oats, water, a pinch of salt, and a bit of butter. Bring it to a strong boil on your stove for 15 minutes. Transfer it immediately into the sand. Press the sand up around the sides until it reaches the lip of the lid. Close the wooden top. Go to sleep. At 6 in the morning, lift the lid. Those oats will be fully cooked, still gently steaming, with no scorched bottom and no power used overnight. The first time you see that, something shifts in your thinking, because you realize that the complexity and the cost you accepted as normal was never necessary. Now here is the part that gets darker. In 1978, a trade group representing major appliance manufacturers sent a formal delegation to the United States Department of Energy. They were lobbying against a proposal to include retained heat cooking in federal energy efficiency education programs. Their internal documents, which later surfaced through a public records request, argued that promoting these methods would undermine the market position of established manufacturers. The proposal was dropped, and every method that could have cut American household cooking costs by 60 to 70% was quietly removed from every government energy guide ever published. Not because the methods did not work, because they worked too well. What makes this story even more striking is a 1972 internal study from a Pennsylvania State University researcher who measured cooking fuel use in Amish households compared to non-Amish households of equivalent size in the same county. The Amish families used approximately 1/3 of the cooking fuel. The single biggest factor cited was retained heat cooking with the sand oven. That study was filed. No follow-up research was funded. Nobody publicized the findings. I want to leave you with a question that I have been sitting with since I first learned about all of this. What else was quietly removed? The sand oven is one piece. The fireless cooker is another. The hay box method is another. These are not ancient superstitions. They are documented, tested, physically sound techniques that saved fuel, reduced fire risk, and fed families reliably for generations. They were not replaced because something better came along. They were replaced because something more profitable came along. And there is a real difference between those two things. You watched this video for a reason, and whatever that reason was, I think you already know the answer to that question. If this made you think, share it with someone who should see it. Drop a comment below and tell me whether you have ever seen anything like this in your own family history. An old neighbor, a grandparent, something cooked slowly in a way that never quite made sense to you until now. Those stories matter. And subscribe to Secret Verse because we are just getting started.